Welcome back for day two. Yesterday was great papers, great discussion. So let's continue that today. Before we start though, I want to take a moment and thank Lisa again. She wasn't here yesterday. So let's give her a round of applause. Everything that happens behind the scenes is Lisa. So this conference would not happen without her. So thank you. So let's go ahead and get started with the first presentation. So Beth Blankenspor will be presenting her paper with Ed and Chinchin.
I think I'll give him a minute. All right, can you hear me okay? Good. Well, thank you so much, editors, for having me here. And thank you everyone for coming. This has been great to talk about Gen AI for the last day. And I am pretty excited to talk about Gen AI and financial reporting for the next hour and 15 minutes. So let's get to it. I'm guessing that I don't have to define what Gen AI is anymore or the potential for its significant impact across a lot of fields. But I really want to reiterate the potential for Gen AI to have a significant impact in financial reporting specifically, whether it's recording transactions all the way through creating the reports. And the reason that we expect this is in part, there are surveys even from early 2024 talking about firms and employees that are using this, whether formally or informally without their boss's knowledge of it. If we look at research, there is growing interest in Gen AI in financial reporting and research, as evidenced by the paper we saw yesterday with Jung Ho and Chloe. And more generally, we've had a lot of conversations with practitioners in the course of doing this paper that really reinforces the idea that this is top of mind for people in financial reporting. And I can talk more about different things that people have said as we go through the presentation today. But a quote from David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, saying that effectively what would take 6 people 2 weeks to write for the IPO S1 filing, 95% could be done in minutes with it. So this is something that everyone in financial reporting is thinking about and talking about how they would want to use it. For our paper, we're focused specifically on the writing of the reports. And we do that for 2 reasons. The first is, if you think about financial reporting, recording transactions, the whole point of this is to create a report to help people who are making decisions. So this is a core task, a core product of financial reporting. And the second reason is that if we think about generative AI, it can do a variety of tasks really well, but at the core, it's about writing. It's about generating that natural language. So if we have a tool that's really good at writing, and we have a task that is effectively writing, this is a natural place to look for firms to start using this Gen AI. So this could be writing the first draft of an MD&A, where you're using informal notes and maybe preliminary financial statements to create that draft. It could be writing a brand new risk factor. It could be taking a human-written first draft of a conference call transcript and then adjusting it to try to really meet the needs of the audience at hand. Lots of different formats and options. And the benefits to firms can come in a variety of ways. The first one, though, is going to be that time and cost savings, where it takes fewer people, less time, less money to write the same reports. The second big benefit is that you could potentially improve the quality of those reports. It could be something where you're taking complex financial information and you're trying to make it understandable for whoever the audience is, whatever the setting. It could be that you're trying to make sure that you meet regulatory requirements within a filing. It could be that you're negotiating with your executives on what in the world they're going to say on the conference call. And having this third-party evidence is a great negotiating tool that ends up having this language within the conference call transcript. Now, if there's agency conflicts, you could also, firms and employees could also use Gen AI to obfuscate or bias or shirk. But again, there are these benefits to firms and employees for that. It doesn't come without costs and risks, though. And the first one being, I'm sure you've all seen these stories of hallucinations and inaccuracies that Gen AI can introduce. You do that in a financial reporting context, and this could be a really big deal where you end up having, all right, I'm going to just keep going. In the financial reporting context, you have the wrong information coming out. This could be big things for capital markets. Now, the second reason is this idea of private information. We talk about using a third-party tool and we're putting in proprietary firm information and we're talking about putting information about an earnings call online right before the earnings call comes out, this is problematic. And these costs could really become a problem if there aren't formal processes in place, if there aren't in-house tools. And yet that in-house tool, formal processes, that's really costly to implement. So it's costly implementation, trying to get employees on board. In general, then, the question is empirical question of to what extent are firms using GenAI in report writing? Now, our approach is we're going to look at a bunch of different disclosures, and we're going to use a detection tool to try to find that GenAI. We're using GPT-0, which is a tool that has gotten some praise in a variety of settings for its accuracy, but it hasn't been looked at in financial reporting. And what the research has shown is that these tools vary in how well they can detect depending on the setting, because they were trained with different corpuses, with different purposes. So first thing we want to do is validate it in the financial reporting. And we'll use human written reports from before ChatGPT was released, and we'll use researcher induced, meaning we insert the GenAI into the documents to try to make sure that there isn't excessive false positives or false negatives. Yeah.
I mean, this sounds really interesting, but it seems obvious you would do this, right? I mean, there's no downside really, in the sense that, yeah, it could screw up. Hard to see how it's going to come up by itself with proprietary information, but maybe it does. If any of these disclosures are reviewed so carefully and vetted by the firm, by the lawyers, by the whole process, that it seems like letting this thing do a first draft, maybe a whole bunch of time. I mean, that's what we do, right? We get someone else to write the first draft. I mean, there's not a lot of downside to doing that. Maybe it's a bunch of time. And then if it screws up, then you fix it, right? Relatively low cost.
Yeah. So
like, why wouldn't everyone be doing this to increasing extensive?
yeah. So I love that you are on board, Doug, because I think there are many people that are on board, right? We talked with practitioners that said people are using this for everything. But that was a comment said in 2025. And I think things were not necessarily the same way in 2023 and in 2020, 2022, 2023. Also, there are a lot of people that also said, no, we can't use this for finance and accounting. It's too risky. It's too difficult. We definitely don't want to go down that path. So I think what we have heard, at least, is that there are people that are concerned about the inaccuracies. They're concerned. They've been told explicitly by their company to not use this until they get an in-house LLM, and that's not going to come, at least in the 2022, 2023 range.
Have human, like, taking it, right?
I think that they should, and I would assume that they would, but let's say you're in a small company and you are part IR and part something else, and you're the one that has to do all of the work. Is someone going to be checking it? Will they know that you're even using GenAI? I think this is an open question that we want to look at.
Usually you want to at least have a lawyer.
I mean, yeah, I think that this is why it's really interesting that we're looking at different disclosures, because it's going to have there are going to be different incentives, different oversight, there's disclosures. Yeah.
On this, I want to take a little bit the other side, depending on what you just said, which document we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want to say, oh, we now know this, but we didn't know in 22, 23, because that's what your GINA is. And then, because we're not writing history sort of papers. So in that sense, I think the question is still super relevant, but where I would take the other side is I thought that a lot of annual reports were basically, they've been written, they get updated. And there, it's not so obvious to me that the GenAI is going to do necessarily that much quicker a job if you're just updating certain paragraphs or numbers, because the amount of information you need to put in the prompt for it to do a proper job of the updating, not so clear. For the S1, I could totally see if you needed to write something largely from scratch for a particular company, how this would be exactly like Doug is saying.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that I didn't mean to say that everyone is using it now. I think it's going to vary across time. It's going to vary across disclosures. I mean, this is someone, I talked to someone last week who is literally writing an S1 and said, oh, I could never use it to write a business description. And yet we find that they do. And so I think there's variation across what people are comfortable with doing. And that will continue to see, we'll continue to see some of that variation.
Later on the same point, I mean, I think you have three questions there, right? So the first question, I guess to Doug's point, how much do you care about the first one, establishing a baseline versus the other two parts of the paper? And if you care about the first one, my concern is that you could be severely understating, right? Just kind of false negatives on this detection tool. So it would be important to maybe run as a 2-3 tools and see if you can kind of have a range, because these measures, they're going to have false positives, maybe to a lesser extent, but false negatives. And I actually think that the statistics that you document, maybe the earliest sample period, but I think the use is much higher.
Yeah.
That's, I have no basis other than just get feeling that the use is much higher.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, our primary questions are first looking to see if they haven't, if there is an extent, are they using it? What is the extent of usage? The second is, does that vary with benefits that we might expect them if they are really using it? And then the third is, what are the linguistic report implications? So I think we're interested in both, in the sense that we're interested in understanding if they did it, but we can't rely on what we did in the second part until we actually validate. So I think the validation is very important. Now, what you're speaking to is, okay, false positives, false negatives, there is some potential for these tools to be conservative. We're using GPT-0 and it was developed within a context of academic student submissions, and they don't want to be the company that says this is an AI document and the student gets punished and it really wasn't. So there could be a conservative bias downward. We find that in our testing, it does a pretty good job of detecting these amounts. So I'm less concerned about that. I mean, we could look at other GPTs. I don't know that I would see a bigger difference. I think the lower bound, what we're going to find, what we show, the lower bound estimate exists in part because we're only looking at the final writing in the report. And so something like if I use it for the first draft and then I edit, those edits, you know, if they're large edits, then they're not going to be picked up as GenAI. So I think that's a bigger concern of the lower bound estimate. What our hope is that that is at least correlated with other activity that GenAI is doing, and that this at least gives us a lower bound estimate of what they're doing. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify how GenAI here is defined. For example, somebody's using Grammarly.
Yeah.
Who reads their draft. Could be multiple things. There could be just Grammarly language, and that language is also then potentially going to be picked up as GenAI. Grammarly being very standardized from and suggestion. So how would you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the construct we're looking, what we're thinking is trying to get at the fundamental GenAI, this new generation of LLM where they're actually generating the language. Historically, Grammarly existed before this new iteration of GenAI, and that was not generative, you know, natural language generation in the same sense. Now, I'm assuming Grammarly is now using GenAI. And so, you know, this tool, that tool, I think we wouldn't want to get to that specific. It's more thinking about, are these patterns of language that are consistent with what a generative AI tool would create? And that's what GPT-0 is specifically looking at. They're looking at perplexity. What is the probability that the words in the pattern we see are likely to be generated by LLM? Burstiness, is this something that is varying length like human written language would be, or is it more consistent like the GenAI would be? So we're focused on tools that really generate language. It gets fuzzy as these other tools start to incorporate GenAI within them.
My question is, so there are kind of a pretty open platform for Gen AI, and there's also domain specific, but I heard it both has been used in business. Particularly for the latter one, that they're concerned about the privacy. So I wonder for GPT-0, if they're able to have this domain specific AI.
Like, can GPT-0 detect things in the financial reporting context?
Exactly. If they write using domain specific AI, can they detect that?
Yeah.
And
yeah, so this is something that we were concerned about going into it, because the research that's used these tools and has validated it, they find that different tools do better and worse in different contexts, depending on probably what corpus was used to train it. So GPT-0 was not trained on financial reporting, and there weren't tests in its detection ability in financial reporting. So that's why it's so important that we did the validation within the context. Now, I think they were trained, they do pretty well in news articles and corpus like that, even though they were trained for student submissions. So it actually is consistent with their ability and accuracy in other settings, but that's why our validation is important within financial reports.
But your validation, did you use the GPT, right, for insert AI content? Into other.
Yes, we took human written reports, financial reports, and then we ran them through GPT 3.5, GPT 4.0, Gemini, and inserted varying levels of Gen AI text, and then ran it through GPT 0.
What I'm asking is the domain, you use domain specific AI to write that part.
Oh. You're not talking about GPT 0, you're talking about, we didn't, and the reason that we didn't is because we wanted to try to get any kind of use. And so a lot of those domain specific tools are just being developed now. So I think that could be interesting to see if it varies in its ability to adjust things or in its detection. We wanted to get at just general use. People have ChatGPT on their phone or on their computer and go from that. But that would be an interesting further question.
Just a minor thing that I think would be helpful. It doesn't affect much of what you're doing. This is a clarification in the writing eventually, and it was just quickly on one of your slides. So you cite the Elundu et al. Paper in Science, which is great. I just want to clarify for people. So, and you're correctly saying accounting is one of the most exposed professions. Just want to make sure that people understand, like when you say exposed, this is unsigned. It could be exposure. Sometimes it's going to be augmenting or complementing. Sometimes it's going to be. I just don't know that that's clear to people when they read. Like I think what they think when they see most exposed is for sure. Which may indeed be the case, right? We're going to be firing all these people, but it could sometimes be augmenting there. Anyway.
Absolutely. Like, I think we're not making claims on that the number of employees in this area are going to decrease or increase. This is that there's potential for it to be used in the tasks that we're doing. And it could be that this gets used in these tasks and actually IR becomes more important because it becomes more skilled and we're able to do a lot of areas. Yeah. Right. How well the what? Okay.
And I think if we say that like 1% people find that, then you can just go and randomly audit a document and look and see, okay, does this have an AI use?
Yeah.
We have to audit 100 documents to find one that uses.
I mean, I'll clarify, but keep going.
If there's a 1%, but what you guys quote in terms of precision, close to 50%, which means that you use this as a classifier to pick the documents we should audit. You only have to audit 2 documents, find something that has Gen AI in it. So I mean, I think it's outstanding actually. I think it's phenomenal. Maybe there's risks if you use it in the business setting. Students cheating is really really bad and positive. But I think from a research perspective, probably file.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. I mean, because that's what we wouldn't want to say. You have this tool, and definitely this report was written with Gen AI. And it could be that instead of there's one report in 100, it's that there are 10 reports that have 10% of the report written with Gen AI. But what you're saying is this at least narrows it down. And I think from our perspective, it allows us to think about broad sample to be able to, at least if we're not calling out one specific firm, we can look at a portfolio of firms and adjust it there. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I have no idea who was first, so I'm going to go in the back and then come forward. Yeah, Regina.
I find your last question the most interesting because it has the biggest capital market consequences.
Yeah.
But reading the paper, I wasn't sure your take on it. Do you think firms do it on purpose? Then we should all be worried, right? Then we should teach everybody how to detect this context and be careful about it. But if it's natural quality of Gen AI at this point, which will be improving over time, we should be less worried. And I felt it was kind of a mixed message from the paper, so I wanted to know how you view it.
Yeah. So you're asking, what is, do we think that they're intentionally creating these outcomes of financial reporting or not? And can I say, it's going to vary. I mean, that's why we come across where we come in agnostic, right? Because firms could intentionally use it for a specific purpose. And research has shown if you craft the prompt correctly, you can get the outcome that you want. There's also research, though, that if you use general prompts or you're not that careful, things can come out that you might not have intended. And so I think Could firms use this to obfuscate or to spin or bias? Absolutely. Could they also just use it to save time and then not create the prompt carefully or not oversee it carefully enough, and then it becomes more positive or it becomes less readable? Yes. And so that's where I think we can't say what they're doing with it, but we can say the outcome, or we can't even say the outcome. We'll say the relation. I'll take the frank descriptive path. The relation is that there is some evidence that it's less readable and longer and more positive, which is consistent with them intentionally doing it, but it also could be them just using it to save time and not being super careful with it. Yeah, so I think we just don't know, and we need more research on it. Yeah.
I think you've done enough work on that area, make that in the first place. Even if it's a descriptive question, but it's worth saying, with available tools that are in today's age pedestrian 3 years ago, can we detect some use? And I think the answer is reliably yes, to a certain classified rule. So that
Good.
and then the second, and I got in this paper.
Sorry, Miguel.
I like this paper. It is
You've only seen half the paper. Sorry.
Right. They use it to assist in the writing of reports. And even that little spin, I think will go a long way when people are really doing. Like I've been using this to write recommendation letters.
Yeah.
And my letters are much better now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where I use it, even with the same tool,
Yeah.
my writing gets better.
Yeah.
Right. So words like expose, and no one exposes themselves good. Yeah. It's good. I don't see this as a threat to account.
Yeah.
To writing of financial reports, maybe to balance sheets, but
Yeah.
in writing disclosures, this is a force for good.
Yeah. This is great. I mean, I think that there is a strong potential for this to be used for good, and it shouldn't be vilified and firms pointed out, they're using it. But it does take careful use and coverage. Yeah, Matthias.
I would just encourage you to maybe embrace the descriptive nature even more. Because in response to Doug's point earlier, you kind of tried to say, yeah, now we may know, but a few years earlier we didn't know. And so that was our typical intent of bringing in tension. I don't think you need anything remotely close to tension here. What matters for this to be important is the context is important for us. So these are the typical disclosures we look at, and the phenomenon needs to be important. Yeah. And that's definitely, we have an entire conference on this. So I think the only part there to me is that the specific context where this would be even more important is like more recently. So extending one more year, that would be another thing that maybe would help to not be too early evidence. But otherwise, I think just documenting these things, so it is super important. We need a baseline, and then putting it exactly into the right institutional structure, saying that's why these things most likely get picked up, because there's still someone, it's assisting us, and there's still someone looking at it. So that's why most likely this is not a much concerning trend, but this is how this all makes sense institutionally, and that's the baseline data we have on that. So I think that's a great opportunity for you to write this, and mostly it's there already, but I think you can even embrace that more and don't have to go with, in 2022, maybe no one did it. So that could be surprising if someone does.
Yeah. So this is great. I mean, I'm glad that you see that this is fundamentally important, and we would agree with that. And this idea that what our contribution is just going to be some evidence that we are seeing this usage and we're seeing these relations, and we need to keep doing further work on it. We haven't gone to 2024 in part because one of the strengths of our approach is that we're using a detection tool that has a time lag to catch up with any adjustments to the model. So we haven't done that yet, but I think it's great, this idea that we're trying to get at this relations and what we're seeing and move from there. Yeah, okay, Charlie.
Just on these points, I wonder if one way to tackle some of these concerns about, well, isn't this kind of obvious, is not to lean into the fact that we know people are going to adopt, but to focus on the rate of,
speak up a little bit.
but to focus on the rate of adoption. We don't know, and plenty of folks in management are very interested in how quickly these general purpose technologies get adopted. Now, you might see that the rate of adoption that you're documenting is quite slow, putting aside the measurement issues.
Yeah.
And then you have these interesting cross-sectional tests that might help you test some hypotheses about like what are the constraints to adoption.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, at least, it's not readily obvious.
Yeah, and you're right. I think we can speak to that at minimum of saying this is an interesting and useful research path going forward that the field should take, because I agree that the rate of adoption is very interesting. And right now, we're still pretty early in the process. I mean, even if we updated another year, I'd be hesitant to say now we know the rate of adoption. I think that's going to be something that we need to look at, you know, as the next 10 years unfold to see how is this used, how quickly is it adopted. Yeah. Yep, got it.
But with the managerial intent part of the story, or are they using Gen AI to be optimistic or obfuscating? I think that doesn't matter so much. So what happens is if a manager decides to be optimistic, there's still no reason there for why they would use AI to be optimistic. Right? They could just write it themselves to be optimistic, right? I think what matters is what makes them decide to use AI, which is a second order decision conditional on the task they've already determined to do.
Yeah.
So the intent part of it, I don't think you have to even stress it much, right? Okay. The second part of the comment is with that in mind, then it might really help if you could do this. It's somewhat along the lines of what Ranford was suggesting, but if you could isolate parts of the MD&A and run your GPT-0, kind of figure out which parts of the reports they are more likely to use AI in, right? Because they might have, if it's business risk that the managers understand very well, they might be the writers of that part. But if it's currency risk, they might use AI, something like that, right? So that might help understand where they're taking that decision to use AI.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's right. And I would agree with the first part that we're focusing on the intent to use Gen AI, then thinking there could be different outcomes. That's interesting. We've looked at different disclosures to try to see if there are different incentives for those disclosures. And we've maybe gotten a little bit at the topics if we get into the IPO filings, the S1, but not to the granularity that you're talking about of are there specific sections within the MD&A? And so if there are differences, that could be something that would be interesting to look at too. Okay. So our hope with the contribution is that we're going to have some of this early evidence, but that also we're going to be able to take our data and ideas and motivate some future research down this, also take this validation method and approach and have this be something that is a starting point for people trying to do something similar. We're looking at 4 exposure types, and this is what we kind of been talking about throughout, where we're looking at risk factors and MD&As and the 10Qs and the 10Ks, and then conference call presentations and earnings announcements. And what's nice is that there are some fundamental differences across these, with the risk factors being more formal, more consistent over time, more generic in a less firm specific, whereas the MD&A still has the formality of the report, but they're somewhat consistent, a little bit more change over time, a little bit more firm specific information. The conference call presentations, bust to the other extreme and say, now we've got a spoken communication that management is heavily involved with because they're the ones that are speaking it, and it's not as consistent. So there are different incentives, different processes around it. And then the earnings announcement press release, which on one hand is brief, so you wouldn't necessarily think that they would want to use it. On the other hand, it's also very important. And this idea of a mix of formal and informal language and wanting to get things just right could give a lot of incentives to use Gen AI in it. For our main test, we're looking at whether there is more Gen AI usage, whether there's Gen AI usage after ChatGPT was released, because this is the piece that made it broadly accessible to all sorts of users. So taking that Gen score, which is the likelihood of AI existing from the GPT-0 detection tool, and then regressing it on this post indicator and controls and firm quarter fixed effects. Yeah, Nemeth.
I just want to go back to Doug's initial point about is this as obvious as this what people think it is? I mean, some of the disclosure types you're looking at, they involve confidential information up until. So if this is being fed into a GPT system, that can create a problem, right? So that might be some violation, some internal control process. So I just don't know if it's as obvious as at least some of the discussions seem to suggest.
That's right. So I would agree with you that there is tension. I think what we see are some really clear benefits that could come from it, and also some really clear costs. And this idea of, yeah, are you really going to take your earnings announcement before it comes out and put it in this third-party tool that you have no idea what they're doing the data with? Especially if your boss says, absolutely don't use this. My guess is that they wouldn't use it in that context. And so there's some strong tension, I would agree. Yeah.
Going back to Charlie was saying, we can observe like cross-sectional adoption rate. I think there's also potential for this to be a good measurement paper, because there's a lot of like internal managerial process we don't observe and we hope to observe. And now here we have different measurements on CEO style, whether they like to improvise or whether they like to read through a script and then try to redeliver the script. And now we have a good detection system in terms of measuring management style or internal governance process. I think that kind of, if you make the data public, it's like a good mind for all other researchers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is what we're hoping, is that we can make the data public and it will help people look at things in different ways. Now, I would never say that you can see what print managers are doing based on whether they had Gen AI or not, but it is an indicator potentially of, if we're trying to see, are they following a script? Well, if what they're saying it has strong probability of being Gen AI, yeah, they're probably following the script. And so it might give you some sense of what's actually happening inside the firm. Yeah. Okay, I thought I saw a hand. Yes, Christina.
Oh, can you elaborate more? What do you envision as an input to an AI model to draft these disclosures? Like, for example, for risk factors, many companies are just looking at what their peers are doing, right? So do you see that I'm just feeding a bunch of risk factors from my peers and asking an AI model to draft my risk factors? Or for conference call presentation, do you see managers just giving bullet points saying, can you spin it in a nice way so I can? So I'm just curious about, how do you envision the process, the input that goes into AI?
Yeah, I think either of those examples that you talked about could happen. So in conversations that we've had with practitioners and in envisioning ourselves what it could be starting from informal notes from conversations that they've had with managers about how the firm is performing. And that would say, okay, take these notes and craft, whether it's an MD&A or a conference call transcript. It could be taking bullet points and saying, write it from here. It could be saying, here are the key features for my company, and here is my peer firm's disclosure. Can you write it in this style? Take these points, write it in this style, because I really like how this peer firm crafted their disclosure. I think any of those are possible. And in some cases they talk about if there is no input, then they might want to write a little rough draft themselves and then put it in and say, can you make this sound better or sound more like what it should be? So I think across the board, it's all levels of first draft, revisions, later drafts, all sorts of inputs, whether it's firm specific, notes, a full draft, pure information, all of that is fair game. Yeah.
The tension point is maybe getting to Nemit's point. You can be surprised both ways by an effect size, right? Like magnitudes matter.
Yeah.
Was this bigger or smaller than
So we didn't come in with strong priors. Now, the quote I showed at the beginning where they said 95% could be written, that I would have been shocked if it was 95%. And I think y'all would have been as well. I think 1% is probably, it's a little bit of a lower bound estimate, because we are just looking at the Gen AI that remains at the end in the final report. So my assumption is that there's more Gen AI use than what we're seeing in that 1 to 2%. Also because there is, if there's any incentive in the tool to be a little conservative in it. But honestly, 1% could be 50% of firms using it in 2% of the reports. I mean, small is a little more realistic. I don't know that they're really writing their whole report with this, especially when we're dealing with, like Christian was saying, the MD&A and the risk factors that are sticky over time, where they're not going to rewrite the whole thing.
even the new text, a little bit small, but
Yeah.
And then just one question. The people I talk to, what they're really worried about is they put information into it, that information out there now.
Yeah.
Right? They're scared to give it the inputs.
That's right.
And what they want is sandbox AI, right? That's really catching on. Was that kind of around back then?
you know, obviously we don't test that, but the conversations that we've had say that even large companies were just getting it 2024 or 2025. So I don't think that it was for the vast majority of companies. Wait, sorry, Jewel, and then I'll come back to you.
Just another tension point. So I guess for me, it wasn't super obvious that people were going to be using it. I think one thing that I think about is like, so there's some work being done by behavioral economists where they're showing that like people who believe that AI is going to replace their job is like are less likely to use AI, whereas the people who believe it's just going to like supplement what they're doing. So like when you talk about that in accounting, potentially some people are going to think like they're just going to start downsizing and things like that. Then I think those people who are concerned about that are probably going to be less likely to use it. So it wasn't super obvious that everyone's going to be using it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this idea of employee reticence, I pull that into this idea of costly implementation, that there are employees that are, if they would worry that if they use this, they're kicking themselves out of the job. And I think that that is a very real path, a very real reason that this adoption would be slower. Yeah, okay, where'd you go?
So quick follow-up to Steve. So I can envision, for example, you put a MD&A from last year there and you say, update our growth in Asia and the new product line.
Yeah.
And then rewrite. And then you change 1%.
Yeah.
So do you consider that a 1% or 100%?
Oh, one, like if there's
1%, but in fact, you're writing the whole thing.
yeah.
Feeding the whole thing, but it's changing relative to last year, 1%.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we would be looking at the text that is actually detected as being likely generated by generative AI. And so if you feed the whole report and it only changes one sentence, you know, 1%, it would be 1%.
But in fact, you're using for the whole one.
That's right. I mean, if yes, like this is under, in the same, this is a lower bound because they're asking it to change the whole report. They actually only see the 1%. Yeah. Yeah. Andrew.
Not of running a hazard model adoption. I mean, if we think that every firm is going to do this, I think it's still interesting who does it first versus who comes a lot later.
Yeah.
Related to Charlie's point earlier.
Yeah, we haven't done that. And in part, this kind of relates back to the point about learning over time, the rate of adoption. I don't know that we really have a long enough time series right now to answer that, but I think it'd be really interesting to see. And again, with the caveat that we don't know for sure if they're using Gen AI, but we could start to get a sense for what kinds of firms adopt it earlier versus later. And our assessment of, you know, the high versus low Gen AI, near the end of the table, we'll have some, near the end of the paper, we'll have a table where we compare and see that at least smaller firms do seem to be more quick to adopt in this fashion. But I think that'd be interesting. Charlie.
And I get thinking about your cross-sectional tests, are the reason like you find it in the smaller, more highly levered firms, is it because they're like the C students that clearly like copy and paste right into ChatGPT 0, or is it they really are having some sort of cost benefit analysis that's different than like large S&P 500 companies?
Yeah, you know, I'm not in the room with them, so I don't know. I can't say what grade they got in their accounting class. But what I can say is that they likely have fewer resources, right? They have fewer people, and if they're going to see more benefits, whether it's because they're a C student and have trouble writing, or if it's because they have so many tasks and they can't get it done, they're just going to be more likely to use it to try to, I mean, ideally improve their reports.
Yeah. I guess then that gets to the next point of like, well, then the cost, like to Doug's point, like there must be differential costs between like the big companies and the small companies, and maybe trying to like build that out at like what fixed costs is essentially inducing these small firms to not hire those IR people, something like kind of maybe building up that tension.
So you mean like why they would have fewer resources in the first place?
Or just like talking more about like why don't they have like, you know, why is the optimization different for big companies versus small companies?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk more about, I mean, there are, you know, the counterpoint to saying why it could be that large firms actually adopt sooner is that they're more able to potentially get an in-house tool and then start to have a policy to say employees use this. So that, I mean, there is some tension in that prediction a little bit. We could talk more about that. Yeah. Yeah, Christian.
Can you explain what the firm fiscal quarter fixed effect is in your research design here?
Yeah, so what we try to do is say we're using Qs and Ks. We're using all the quarters for the conference calls. And so in the same sense that you wouldn't expect a Q1 risk factors to be the same as a Q4 risk factors, or a Q1 conference call to be the same as a Q4, What we want to do is control for seasonality in the disclosures and make sure that
This is firm times quarter, or is it firm, is it just quarter?
it is, so think Q1, 2, 3, 4, and it's firm times quarter. So each firm, because we are using 2010 through 2023, we have a nice long time period to start to model what do their Q1s usually look like and how different are the Q1s or Q2s or Q3s or Q4s in the post period.
Are you not worried? I mean, I would kind of get that, but you want to think a little bit about how T0 makes systematically mistakes for different firms and therefore kind of get the firm fixed effect.
Yeah.
But aren't you worried when you interact with quarter that you're basically pulling out a significant amount? Like you're just going to get something that's abnormal for that firm. But I thought you'd want the basic sort of usage of the firm. And the firm quarter would pull that out. Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I think the key is that most of our sample is before ChatGPT. It's before GenAI. And so what we want to do is get what would a typical Q1.
I now get it. You're doing firm Q2 always.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so we've got this nice long, let's like set the stage, what would we expect? And if this is different, then okay, this is likely going to be GenAI, you said. Yeah, Anthony.
I was curious to go back to one of the questions about the way like GenAI is used for financial reports.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a situation where it could be used as like a first draft. You want to use it to basically start from scratch versus situations where individual comes up with the first draft, puts that in and says, let's clean this out, make it more concise. Does GPT-0, is it able to like track both of those, or is it mostly focused on able to identify situations where it's ChatGPT being used for that first draft? It seems like there could be differential like effects of ChatGPT on say like readability and some of these more linguistic cues that seem like more relevant for the capital market context. So I guess it's like wondering which of those scenarios do you think GPT-0 is capturing? Maybe it's both, but it seems like it could have different results and implications for how we think about GPT helping readability and things like that.
Yeah. I think GPT-0 can detect either whether it is used as a first draft or it's revising a human written draft. The key is how much of that language remains in the final version. So if it's used to create a first version and then I completely rewrite the whole thing, it's not going to see it. If I use it as a first version and then I change a thing here and a thing there, it's going to say, oh yeah, I think that there's some GenAI in here. It's going to see these phrases and these sentences that have the GenAI qualities and it will catch it. So the key is how much of that language is retained near the end. And that can happen under both scenarios. Like we took an example of like a paragraph from our paper and ran it through GPT. And the first time we ran it, it was 0% AI because we wrote it. And then we asked GPT to change it and we ran it through and it said 100% AI. Even though it was saying the same content, it changed the words and said, this is all Gen AI. If we had gone in then and adjusted half the sentences, it would say this is 50% Gen AI or 40% or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We first need to validate, right? We want to understand how this tool is working, and that validation is really important. And so we try to say, are we going to have a lot of type 1 errors? Are we going to, the two big concerns here are a latent temporal trend or abnormal statistical properties in the model. Or are we going to have type 2 errors, these false negatives, where we have measurement error or not a large enough sample? So we start by creating this sample that we talked about from 2010 to 2023 across these 4 different disclosure types. And then for the validation, we want to focus on those reports before ChatGPT came out, well before, so that we can plausibly say these are human written. So we're going to take 2018 to 2020. And then because we're going to run a bunch of different calls against GenAI for it, about 12 million API calls for each LLM, and we're going to take just a sample of our, a random sample of 500 firms, get them across the 3 years. So we've got 1,500 observations for each of the 4 disclosures, and that gets us our validation sample. The first thing we do is run it through GPT-0 and say like, this is great. The mean probability of AI, the mean Gen score is between 2 and 4%, which means, yes, if they're truly human written, then that is a little bit of measurement error, but it's really small, right? We've got 2 to 4% across chance, so very low percent that they say that it's AI. Then what we want to do is actually test it within the structure of our model and say, instead of having an actual post year we're going to make a fake post year, a false post year, where we randomly pick one of those years within the period and say, this is our post. Ideally, it's not going to find that it's significant. But if we run this test at a 90% confidence, we're going to see some, what we actually see is rejection of the null at 10%, which is what we would expect in a well-specified model. So it doesn't seem like the statistical properties are a concern here. We're not concerned about these type 1 errors. We'll deal with the time trend when we get to our full sample. Then the next thing we want to do is look at our analysis, this idea of, can I catch any Gen AI? Can I catch if it's very little, or does it have to be very big? And to do this, we take these reports and we ask GPT to modify the words in them. And then we systematically swap out Gen AI versions for the human written versions of the reports. And what we want to do then is, instead of a false post, it's an induced post. And now, if it's working properly, we should see that coefficient come through. We should see results. And I'm going to show the ones from GPT 3.5, but we also ran this with 4.0 and with Gemini as well and see similar results. And the first thing we do is at the document level. We give it the document and we say, change this, rewrite it to make it more clear. And we give it a little bit of instructions to be like, this is a risk factor, kind of make it look like a risk factor. What we find is that the means are between 60 and 91% for AI probability, which was, again, very exciting. This is quite good. Where we say, actually, yes. And this is despite the fact that when you change the wording, not all the words get changed. So there is some carryover that's still human written. Yeah.
So just clarify, when 60, 91%, it means you know that Gen AI content was 60, 91%. Or it was much more. Like
no, yeah.
Volume, didn't capture the volume, or just probability Gen AI is in here somewhere. Or it's like 91% in by Gen AI. Can you put the length of text that was produced?
Yeah, so what we can say is that we gave it the whole document and we said, replace this whole document with Gen AI. And so in theory, it should have been 100% Gen AI. Now, what's hard is if I tell it to change this whole paragraph, it's going to change, maybe like 80% of the words, but 20% will still be the same. And so it doesn't actually replace all of the words all of the time. So there is some essentially where it keeps some of those phrases and it carries through, even though we've asked it to rewrite it.
In other words, we cannot really pose the question on the volume of text by Gen AI. So it's only probability with which Gen AI is inferior. So we cannot even formulate this question. What is the percentage of the text is given in Gen AI generated? It's whether Gen AI has interfered or not.
I mean, we can get at some of the percent of text. Here, we just asked it to change everything and it kind of didn't. But I think the sentence level replacement that I'll show in a minute is going to answer your question, because here we're varying, we're giving it a whole bunch of firms and saying all of these firms adopted it, what happened? And in fact, when we look at this test, what we'll actually do is even vary the percent of firms that adopt it. We'll say alpha 100% adopted, 50%, 20%, 10, 5, 1. And we can see that it says, yep, the coefficient decreases as you have fewer firms that are adopting it. But what you're talking about is this sentence level replacement. And that's where then we say, okay, one sentence at a time, we have it rewrite each sentence. And then we take that and replace 1% of the sentences, 5%, 10%. And then we get at this idea of not only do we have a change in alpha, but we have a change in mu usage. And then we can see, okay, when you get to the far corners of very few firms, 1% of firms with 1% of the sentences changed, we can't detect that in our tests. But we can detect to this level of about 5% usage, 10% sentences. And in fact, if we get rid of the sticky text, we can get down to, say, 5% of firms using it in 5% of their sentences. Yeah, that's it.
But it still sounded, just to clarify on that, because it sounded really, it's a document level detection score. So that, because it's not giving you, okay, it's X% of the text. Of course, your detection probability goes down then, but it's not capturing its X% of that text. It's just more noisy signal of whether that document was using it. So, and that's, I don't think that's a problem, but I do think it's good to clarify that this is then classifying how many folks were using that at the document level. No matter how much, of course, the more you do it in the text, the more likely you are to to detect it, but it's not a perfect function where this is exactly giving you, like if you're just transforming 1%, it's giving you 1% of the detection probability.
Yeah, and their output, they don't say, we're giving you the percent of sentences, but they do assess it at the sentence level, and then they aggregate it up to create their document measure. So if, again, I took, we took a paragraph from our paper and then inserted just one sentence in there, and you could see that now it's not 100%, it's down to, 15% AI. So while they don't say that's what they do, we observe evidence consistent with that being the case, that actually they're aggregating sentence level assessment up to the document level, and it's going to give an increase just for the kind of correlated with the percent of sentences adjusted. Yeah, Valerie.
So you make this 11 million API calls. Are these sentence levels?
We did document level, and then we did each sentence in the whole, in all the reports.
Are you going to show some of the sentences that, are picked up as AI generated?
I have the example that we did with just our paper, but we can. What, do you have a specific question?
Yes. I don't think it's so much of a concern because you do it differently, but in general, I think the concern would be that, there's a lot of very specific text in 10Ks, right? And so it's, like say boilerplate text, right? And if an LLM is trained on that text, it's to some extent related to memorization issue that Bradford was talking about yesterday, right? So there's very specific text. The model is going to flag it as kind of high likelihood, right? And by the way, it would be useful to talk about how kind of GPT-0 detects this, right? So which is basically, they're looking at perplexity, which is basically how likely words fit together, right? How predictable is the next word, right? And so if you have some very, very specific text that's highly correlated and predictable, my intuition is that the model will flag it as AI generated, whereas in reality, it's just kind of regurgitating what it saw during its training. So to what extent this may be an issue, right? That it's kind of over-memorized the text from these financial documents and then flags it as AI generated, while it's just the text that you see all the time.
Yeah, so I think that our tests with the type 1 error help with that concern, because if it's really the case that it just looks at an MD&A and says, oh, I know exactly what this is, then we would see much higher probability of Gen AI in our human written reports as well, right? And what we find is between 2 and 4%, it's very low. So I think being able to compare the pre and the post, one, we don't really see it looking in those reports. I don't know how much LLMs were actually trained on those financial reports. And then two, the structure of our design really helps reduce concerns with that too, because I think it is really important to make sure that we're not having a baseline effect. We want to see the change in it.
It's possible that, LLMs now have been trained on more recent data, right? And there's some kind of trend as a result of that, right? They've seen recent filings a lot more. It might memorize them better than the filings from, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think looking at changes over time is always important to understand how are things changing. Ideally, in our tests, we control for time trends. So hopefully that would help if there is any systematic time trends. Yeah.
I'm less concerned about given your research design, but there was some discussion that a lot of people use it. I think it's very important to make sure that people understand how this works, and that sentences that are very specific to accounting, it might just think that this is Gen AI because it saw these sentences thousands and thousands of times, and therefore perplexity is low, right? Basically, once you start saying that sentence, it just pops out.
Yeah, and I would agree that it's really important to test and validate within the context for that reason, to make sure that it's not something systematic to what people are looking at.
Larry, but wouldn't hurt the baseline that they have when they first run it through, and then they themselves modify, yours would already pop up in the baseline because they are already written. The model has already seen these and therefore thinks that that's highly likely. So under your hypothesis, they would have a relatively high detection probability in the baseline. And then on top of that, they're modifying, and then this thing jumps a lot, right? So in a way that addresses this already, right?
Yeah, but they rewrite the whole document using Gen AI. Of course, that's going to be flagged as Gen AI generated.
But when they do this sort of, like, then what you're saying, what's more meaningful or helpful here is the sentence level stuff. Because in a way there, we have exact control over what was changed, and we want to now know whether that basically flagged. When they take that percentage really down, I think that's a pretty precise test how good this thing is at detection, no?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I think the fact that it's only 2 to 4% in the prior really helps in this context, that we can make sure that there's a baseline.
So reach forward a little bit more.
And then I'll come back to you guys. So we are using the continuous version of the measure because we want to get at all the variation. Some contexts you would want a binary version. So we convert it to a binary version using a couple different approaches, using a threshold based on the distribution within the human reports, and then using terciles of, well, at least these are in the top tercile of usage versus the bottom tercile. And that's something that we'll do a little bit in our final tests. We find that it's a pretty good classifier in that context, especially with the tercile method, that we're at an F1 score above 50% if only 1% of sentences are replaced. We're at 80% if more than 25%. So this is an approach, but it should be, that could be used in future research, but also be cautious and think about where you're going to see it come through. Okay, yeah, Greg.
I think you're.
What?
I think it's been. It's only 1 to 2% of.
Yeah. Good. Okay, I like the support. Yeah, Sean.
So you guys did a lot of validation, so you used the before 2020 as a human sample, and you modified the human sample using different models, GPT and Gemini, and you has different prompts. So I don't know if I asked too much. Can you when you generate the machine writing sample, can you do differentiation two type? One is just modify the language style, another one generate new contents. So right now, what I see is you're holding the content constant.
Yeah.
You want to polish the language as the machine sample to validate it. A lot of question here is how actually manager using the GPT, are they trying to generate new contents or just polish language styles? So right now, you see only to the first one. And I think it's easy for you guys to generate a second one using the same design and same prompt, just change the prompt, say generate new contents. And you can use another validation sample to differentiate how they use it. Are they using it for the language polish purpose or content generation, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of story to add.
I mean, I think that would be really interesting to think about adding content. My concern would be, where does the content come from? And this kind of echoes a little bit our linguistic results, where when we ask it to change the content, the specificity declines, which is what you would expect, because we said, or when we ask it to rewrite, we don't give it any more details. So it's going to summarize and lose the details. If we want to have it bring in more details, like where does that come from, we need to give it. So I think.
Can you use like a relevance, like say add more contents, provide the relevant information to investors, like kind of this kind of contents. Any information GPT think relevant to investors.
Yeah.
See how they write. Yeah. And then
I mean, I think that'd be an interesting question to think about different variety, different angles. I think we definitely would want to be aware of look-ahead bias in that context. But I think that would be something that I think future research can think about doing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. All right. Is it these things? All right. I'm going to zoom for a few minutes to get into our actual results, where we're looking at, is there extent of Gen AI? What is the extent of Gen AI usage? And we're having a post variable to capture the any time after ChatGPT came out, after December 2022 and later. Then we introduced 2023 and 2022 separate indicators to get a little bit at the rate of usage. And then we bring in this idea of an identifying assumption is that there is no time trend, because we're simply looking at a change in time. And if there is, then we want to control for it. So we also include a time trend in our third and what I would say primary specification, along with the controls and the firm fiscal quarter fixed effects. And if we look at the raw data, this is just raw, you can see that there's an increase after the dotted line of treatment, but there does seem to be some time trend. And we don't know for sure why, but it could be that more recent language is more similar to what Gen AI has been trained on. So when we include the firm fiscal quarter fixed effects and controls, that time trend decreases substantially. And then when we do our full sample with the time trend, then again, we see this sharp increase in treatment, suggesting that, yeah, we've got some extended usage here. Yeah.
Not exactly your question, but do you think there's potentially a cost to the perception that you used
Gen AI to write your reports, just like, you know, Miguel's recommendation letter or something. But if you tell it to make it sound less like it was written by AI, it can disguise it. So do you think it's possible that people are learning and becoming more sophisticated? And there's, just like you can detect it, I can also run it through another algorithm that DAIs the sound of the text. And so you could sort of beat the algorithm. And I would assume that if I was a company, I probably wouldn't want to score very highly on this because it potentially looks like you're lazy or you didn't look at things carefully. And so I would have an incentive, just like with my recommendation letters, to hide the fact that I had used AI to write the recommendation letter.
Yeah, I think it's an open question whether firms would want people to know that they're using it or not. On one hand, when we do the survey, firms, they are shouting it from the rooftops if they're using Gen AI. In fact, they're shouting it if they're not using it, but they're just talking about it, right? This idea, they want to show that they are tech forward and that they're incorporating it throughout their processes. So on one hand, I think honestly, they have a lot of incentives to show that they're using it well. The counter is a little bit like what Jewel was saying in that individual employees, if they're using it and people can say, you didn't even write this, why did I hire you again? I could see some potential for that. At the firm level, though, I don't know that there is a stigma necessarily because there hasn't been a lot of attention paid at that firm level. So that I would lean more towards them wanting to talk about them using Gen AI and being able to use it. But I think it's an open question. To the extent that people do obfuscate their usage of it, they rewrite the whole thing, we wouldn't detect it. And in fact, we shouldn't because they rewrote it. They use a tool to do that. It depends on how good the tool is. And I think, again, if it's very good, then we won't be able to detect it. But the GPT-0 detection tool, they are designed to try to unwind those as well. And GPT-0 is pretty good at least these simple attacks, obfuscation attacks. Yeah, it's a good
Ask ChatGPT, it says it's pretty good at beating it.
Yeah, I mean, bias, right? Didn't we learn yesterday about biased sources? Yeah, okay.
This is pretty closely related. I guess I was wondering, so the way you're doing this validation is you're taking human generated stuff and you're saying, hey, ChatGPT, change a little bit of this and let me see if we can figure out the parts that were modified by ChatGPT. Yeah. From the motivation, it sounds like you should really think about the order being the opposite of that. Say, hey, ChatGPT, give me something. Now I, as a human, I'm going to read that, I'm going to edit it, I'm going to modify it. Not necessarily because I want to obfuscate my use of ChatGPT, but just like it's not actually going to be perfect that first time. I'm going to fix the things that need fixing, but it saved me 50 hours on the front end. Yeah. And what I don't know is like, does that fool a lot of these tests, right? The perplexity scores can change wildly because you change the adjective in the middle of a sentence to something that ChatGPT would never have written it that way. But it was a one-word change. And I think that, again, not necessarily because you're trying to obfuscate it. You modify it a tiny bit. And I know you're saying you're getting lower bounds here, and maybe this is just part of why it's a lower bound, but I would imagine you're using it a lot more, but it's not the final product that you get to see. It was like the whole rough draft of ChatGPT. I made a tiny tweak in 2/3 of the sentences, and some of it I rewrote extensively, and some of it I left as is. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, these things say, "Oh, it looks like a human wrote this." I would never put that turn of phrase in. I would never have done this word, even if the skeleton of it is maybe 90% catch.
And I would say if you ask it to create the first draft and it's 90% ChatGPT and you're just making targeted changes, it's going to show up as more than 0 Gen AI percentage. Like these are pretty sophisticated tools and they're designed to try to capture any Gen AI writing. So anything that flows through to the end is going to be detected, and it's at the sentence level of perplexity of is the next word going to be predicted, so phrase level. It's also burstiness, and that's more sentence structure. Are you having short and long sentences? So there are a variety of things that they look at that can help detect, even if it is not completely Gen AI written. But to the extent that if you really rewrite the whole thing, yeah, it's not going to show up as Gen AI. And I don't know if it should, if what we're trying to get at is Gen AI in the final language. What I think we want to know is, did they use it at all? We're hoping that there's some correlation at least with whatever's left in the final report writing with what, the whole process. But I think it's actually pretty good at detecting whatever is left in there after the changing.
I mean, the validations you've done, I mean, I think that's totally plausible, but the validations you've done don't establish that, right? They show that when you take human stuff and you have ChatGPT modify it, you can tell. And I think you're probably right that if you do it the flip way, that the tool will still work. But I think it would be nice if the paper could show us that, or if that's a known fact from other papers, like just give me the site so that I can feel comfortable that these tools would work when you flip the order.
Yeah, I mean, it would in the sense, assume that we flipped the order and then we manually heavily edited half of the sentences. That's very similar to our 50% sentence replacement, right? There have been other studies that look at the usage and they try specifically to obfuscate and they change words here and there and it can see through some of those obfuscations. So I think, yeah, we can talk more about that distinction of how it might show through within. Okay, let me get through this and get to the linguistics and then I'm going to come back to you. So we find that yes, in fact, it does seem that there is usage. It's predominantly in 2023, which is not surprising that because there's only 1 year left of 2022, but we see it across all the 4 disclosures across 2022 and 2023. And we do see that time trend that we saw in that chart. We see it, so it's important that we include the time trend. And this is something for future research, thinking about doing this is to understand, is there any kind of a latent time trend in these detection tools that needs to be accounted for? We adjust a few, we do the same results with a few different specifications where we do a firm-specific time trend to see it. And again, we still find this positive, significant evidence of GenAI usage. We take out the sticky text. So if there are 6-word phrases that are the same as last year's, we cut them out to see what's happening. And what's interesting is in the original tests, it was the MD&A and then the conference call and press releases that had the most changes. Once we remove the sticky text, now risk factors has a lot more of this GenAI usage in it. So that changes how we think about it. And then we look at just the first year of firms' disclosures to try to get at new firms having to write these new disclosures. We again find this evidence of GenAI usage slightly bigger for most of them, but not dramatically bigger. Then to give a sense for, is this like one big firm doing a whole bunch of changes, or is it a lot of firms making small changes? We just looked at the distribution of the change in the GenAI, in the Gen score. And what we see is it seems to be a lot of firms making small changes, not driven by one firm making a ton of changes. The final thing with the usage is the IPO filing. Then we take a completely different disclosure and we take the S1 filing from IPO firms and look at this. This is the first big filing that they have to create. And we separate and pull out 4 sections: the business section, the MD&A, the risk factors, and the prospectus summary. And we find that in 3 of them, there is strong evidence of GenAI usage, especially in that business section. Even though it is talking about the strategy of the business, we're seeing that this definitely has an increase in the Gen score for these firms. Okay. Yes, Bradford.
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure what she does, and Lazarus more of an expert on this than I am, but I'm not in the chart conference. My understanding is just the state of the art is, yeah, like the curvature of the probability, conditional probability distribution. So it's a bit more sophisticated than just, oh, what's the complexity of the sentence? A model does it more with human writing versus Gen AI.
Yes.
I've never seen an accounting paper do such a good job of trying to validate measure. So like I completely believe your measure. And I don't know. I'm curious, like, so what? Like they're using stuff now what? Like can we vibe code ourselves, big short seller website, and then randomly select these people that are using Gen AI according to your measure and tell them, hey, knock it off. Curse or something. How do you like I'm curious now, like what do you do?
Yeah, good. Okay, I'm glad we've convinced you. I hope that we've convinced others that this is good validation. And then the so what is, okay, we found the usage and the cross-sectional, we find it more with firms that are smaller and have fewer resources, fewer reporting resources. They don't have IR. Large events, meaning they have to change their disclosures. This is they likely have to write new disclosures, and lower audit fees. There's likely less access to these audit experts. What we find is, yes, the main result holds. And usually it is, between 4 and 5 of the 8 coefficients are positive and significant for each of these 4 cross-sectional tests, again, saying that there's some correlation with the net benefits. Okay, then I'm gonna get to the why of the linguistics, but let me take another question, Srek.
Maybe it is a bit sort of related and maybe I should ask it a bit later, but I would be curious, as the SEC examiner now, I've got this population portfolio firms that have been modified and you're showing events that, you know, these characters are changing. Are they flagging these comment letters more or less often? That could be a way to sort of talk to net benefits.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea that if we want to try to get at, is this beneficial or not? Well, one area is, does the SEC have fewer questions or more questions? And I think that that would be a really interesting additional research question. I mean, this is the kind of thing we want people to start exploring the variety of ways of what it could actually mean. And the answer might be there's no difference, or it could mean that actually they're writing it better and there are fewer questions. Or if they're using it without as much oversight, then actually they have more questions. And these give a little flavor, right? We're looking at the linguistic financial reporting linguistics, and we're going to look at the ones that have been looked at a lot in the literature, readability, tone, and specificity. And again, these are super descriptive. We're not claiming causality because we try to do some design to get rid of some endogeneity, but there's some that will remain. And the idea is, okay, readability, which is we're using fog a number of words. If they're using it to improve clarity, we would expect it to be more readable. If they're using it to obfuscate, or if they're not really monitoring it, then it might be less readable. For the tone, we use SpinBERT, and if they use it to spin, then it could be more positive. If they're just using it and they're not trying to get a certain tone, then the research on LLMs shows that it could be actually more tonal. It could increase, amplify whatever tone is there, or it could make it less tonal or no effect. I think this is more open. Specificity, if you're using it to organize and explain details, we would expect more specificity. If you're using it unmonitored, like we did in our paper, less specificity. You're not giving it any more details. So that's this, predictions, and we want to actually look at them. Yeah, Charlie.
One last thought on the last set of results. The one nice thing that I thought was percentages were surprisingly low to me.
Yeah.
But the disappointing part is you sell it as, well, it's a lower bound. So is the reality 1% to 100% given all these measurement issues? I think you can do better than that because you have this nice kind of power test. And it seems, and you created the empirical distribution. Can you use that to basically help construct something that looks like an upper bound divided by something 0.6 to 0.9?
So you're saying assume that we take the distribution of measurement error and assume that any lower bound that is purely measurement error, and then apply that to our setting. Yeah, I mean, I think we could. We haven't thought about doing that. That's good. Okay, so we did 2 tests on the linguistics. One is just using our validation sample, because that gives us a sense of, if I just ask it to improve clarity, what happens? And what we find is that it gets longer if we're at the sentence level, shorter if we give it the whole document. And that's because LLMs don't like to write long things. And so, but we do see that if you give it the sentence level, it makes it longer and less readable. And it makes it more tonal. It amplifies whatever tone is there. And it makes it less specific because we didn't give it the details. But if you look at actually firms' reports, we split it into this tercile split, firms that have more GenAI usage versus less GenAI usage. Then what we find is that they have longer reports and less readable reports, more positive tone, and more specific reports. So what's interesting is that these first 3 suggest that either they're not using it, or the first 2 suggest either they're not paying attention or they're using it to obfuscate, longer and less readable. The more positive suggests potentially spin. The more specificity, though, suggests that they're using it to insert details. So this is all, again, descriptive. We don't know for sure what they're doing, but it's interesting to see what happens and compare it to what we see in our validation too. Christian.
Do you have any sense for whether some of this is because we're sort of combining human with AI? And can you actually also pin the properties to the AI generated text? So, I mean, I don't know exactly how specific, but if this were to flag sentence level modifications, can you show that it's the sentence levels modifications that then basically change the overall properties of the document?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I was going to say, like, we in our validation, that's a little bit closer to just pure LLM effect. But you're saying, can we actually look at the sentences that were identified as more likely to be Gen AI and then look at the linguistics on those sentences.
That would make it
Yeah,
really tight. At that
that's
point,
right.
it's not even an association anymore. Then you know these are the I mean, if we believe the model, which we do,
Yeah.
then the next step is kind of really tight link.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't done that yet. And I know that we have some sentence level information. I need to look to see what we have, but I definitely think that that's worth exploring. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I loved all the comments and I'm happy to talk more. Thanks.
Welcome back. So we've heard about the importance of creating some tension in papers. And to create tension for this session, I'm going to tell you that after we are done at noon exactly, there will be lunch boxes outside, which you can eat there, or you can bring back into the room to eat here. That's the only important thing. And so the tension is we need to stop on time so to actually get to the lunch also. So without further ado, we have Joanne talking about Seeking Alpha and ChatGPT, I guess.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to present. My name is Yuan Zhou from Harvard Business School, and this is a joint work with Mark Brashall and Ben Yost from Boston College, and Chen Yang Ma, who's sitting next to Mark. He's my pre-doc fellow student. He's going to join Duke to start his accounting PhD program. So I don't think the JAR conference put together our paper and Best paper back to back by accident. Just as Best did such a great job presenting, they do a careful study examining the use of Gen AI in financial reporting. So the high-level question in our paper is, what have been the consequences of generative AI use by capital market information intermediaries? So just like Bess, Ed, and Qian, we view this as an early step in the field of accounting to understand the impact of Gen AI. And we try to answer this question in the context of Seeking Alpha. So Seeking Alpha is a platform, a crowdsourced platform that enables individuals to share their financial statement analysis. The platform was built in 2004 by a former Morgan Stanley sell-side analyst. And nowadays, it attracts 20 million users. And the authors include both retail investors and industry experts. And both prior literature and anecdotal evidence suggest that Seeking Alpha provides important information and is an influential platform to investors and to the capital market. And in our paper, we define Gen AI use as the use of Gen AI to generate written articles. So an author could use Gen AI to help them screen stocks, search for information, or analyze data prior to writing up the articles. But such uses are just not observable in our setting. So what we capture is just the use of Gen AI as reflected in the written content of the articles. So we first asked the question, do authors use Gen AI to write articles? And once we answer that question, we next try to understand the consequences. Our focus is to understand the consequences at the article level. So how does the capital market react to these articles? And then we extend our analysis to understand the implications for authors who write the articles and for firms that are covered by these articles. Okay, so how do we identify the AI articles? Well, we scan all the Seeking Alpha articles through Originality AI. So similar to GPT-0, Originality AI is another AI content detection tool. So now, let me take you back to November 2022. So back then, ChatGPT was officially released. And then we observe a sharp rise in the percentage of articles that are generated by AI right after the ChatGPT launch. And then we observe a decline in the percentage of AI articles right after Seeking Alpha enforced their no AI policy, which prohibits the authors from publishing AI-generated articles on the platform. Okay, so now we established that indeed some authors use Gen AI to help them write the articles. So next we examine the consequences. We started looking at market reaction to these articles to help us understand the impact and quality and the informativeness of these articles. So we find that compared to human articles, AI articles lead to lower market reaction than human articles, which suggests that AI articles are of lower quality and are less informative than human articles. And then we think, well, the quality of AI articles might depend on who are using the AI tools. There might be some good users of AI and bad users of AI. A good user of AI might already have their thesis in mind and list the bullet points and ask ChatGPT to expand the bullet points in the style of a Seeking Alpha article. And a bad user of AI, for example, those authors who join Seeking Alpha right after ChatGPT, who just wants the compensation from writing articles with little effort. So consistent with this, we find that experienced authors who are more likely to be good users of AI, they tend to write higher quality AI articles. And opportunistic AI authors, they tend to write lower quality AI articles. Okay, so on average, we find that AI articles are of lower quality than human articles, but it doesn't mean that AI articles do not have any information content at all. So what we find is, compared to days with no articles, we find that AI articles still lead to some market reaction, suggesting that AI articles do have information content on average. Okay, so after we looked into the consequences at the article level, we next extend our analysis to look at the implications at the author level and firm level. So what does it mean for authors who write these articles and for firms that are covered by these articles? So we find that the AI adoption helps increase author productivity. So they write more and they are more likely to cover new firms that they have never covered before. And this enables Seeking Alpha as a platform to cover more firms. And lastly, we look at, okay, so what does it mean for firms? We find that the expanded coverage by AI articles helps reduce information asymmetry as reflected in the improved liquidity for previously undercovered firms. Okay, so key takeaways. So in the paper, we first document the prevalence of AI articles on the Seeking Alpha platform. And then we document the consequences of these articles at the article level, author level, and firm level. Okay, so now let me open up for questions. Susie.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question. So my understanding is that there's a lot of variation in the extent to which authors use AI. So they could use it to—
Susie, can you speak up?
Okay, they could use it to do some search, or they could use it to make it write an initial draft, or they could write a draft and make it polish it, right? And so with the AI users, does your AI actually faster? And is it in line with the objectives or the concerns that ahead?
Yeah, so so what we capture, similar to what Beth was talking about, we only capture the written part. So an author can use the AI to, for example, screen stocks or do information acquisition activities. It's not possible for us to capture such activities. So we only capture the writing part. So for writing part, that could include something like authors probably have something in mind and ask ChatGPT to help them write up the first draft, or they just prompt the GPT and ask them, okay, should I buy Apple? Can you write a thesis? So this, as long as the activities are related to writing, we're capturing that. Sean?
So in the best paper, they're holding the content constant. They use GPT to polish the language style.
Yep.
So in your case, you combine both.
Yep.
You maybe generate the content,
Yep.
maybe polish language style.
Yes. Zach?
Yeah, so you still have a pretty high rate of articles being using, Gen AI after they adopt this,
No.
sort of policy.
Yeah.
My question is that there's sort of stated policies and then there's sort of de facto policies. So, and, this doesn't, I think this is one way that you could evolve your story, is that basically as a stated policy, I think it makes a lot of sense for these platforms to say that they screen out all Gen AI writing. From the standpoint, but we talked about the optimal use of Gen AI throughout this conference. That's going to screen out a lot of sort of advantageous production. So my question is, do you think that in practice, what Seeking Alpha is doing is sort of screening out, using it as a screening tool, and then saying, okay, is this an experienced author? Are they sort of a high quality author? Okay, they're using it to, write a paragraph here and there. And, so I think that is probably what they're actually doing. And that I didn't really get that sense from your story. And then the second thing is that actually, if you think about it from the standpoint of your consequences test, that would predict different reactions in sort of the pre and post period. I would expect the articles that are screened out pre-November 23 to be sort of very, low quality articles that are just not going to show up in the post period, and that you're going to retain the sort of high quality AI articles in your post period. So that was sort of, my thought.
Yeah, okay. So your first question is, okay, so if I understand correctly, so they claim that they have better ability to detect and deter this AI generated submissions. And do they completely do that, or do they have any, like, at the author level? The editors might kind of do something like, oh, this is a experienced author, maybe we can be a little bit lenient or something like that. So yeah, of course, we don't know exactly from the information we got from the public information, but that's possible. That's possible. But the thing is, like, based on our standing, they are doing quite a kind of like a harsh way to basically trying to make sure that they are screening out this AI generated articles. And in our sample, we also have this author fix effects. So probably that could help address some of that concern, maybe.
I wouldn't say that it's a concern. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that, the story is more interesting if they have a de facto policy that is different from their stated policy. And then, but related to that, if your story is basically that they have a really harsh, that they're screening out all AI articles, then I think it becomes difficult to explain the high rate of AI results in the post period, given and maybe this is sort of a question for Beth and Ed, but, would you, if they're applying a harsh policy in the post period, would you expect this level of AI in that period?
Okay, so can I answer? So remember, we are using our tool in the fall of 2024, and we don't know what AI detection tool they are using, and they are using their tool in the real time. And we know that the AI tools actually are improving over time for both GPT-0 and for originality AI. So I mean, one assumption is our tool in the fall of 2024 is doing a better job than their tool in real time. But I can say that maybe there are some like more deeper, like how they communicate with the authors, things are going on there. But the thing is, we are pretty confident that what we capture for the AI articles are the real AI articles.
You guys show them your results and what did they say?
Yes, we did. Mark and I talked to the founder, David Jackson, and the head of analysis. So we showed the results. First of all, they,
I mean, specifically the non-compliance part, right? For the relatively high use, I had the same question.
yeah, so what we heard from them is over time they are trying to learn how to communicate with the authors and how to deal with this non-compliance like over time. But maybe we can ask more specific around that time, how they deal with these issues. Yeah, Christina?
Very interesting setting. My question is about what are the financial incentives of these contributing authors? And on the other hand, if I do a bad job as an author, what are the consequences? And like, since you're finding such a significant increase in the articles as well as the new firms that they cover, how much benefit do I get if there is a benefit? Can you elaborate on that just to better put things into context?
Yeah, so why do the authors write articles, right? What are their incentives? So the incentives come from the direct payment to them from writing the articles, and also some of them do have some reputation concerns too. So that push them to write good quality articles. So let me explain. So for the financial incentive, for the direct payment, a large payment actually depends on the unique subscriber bills. And another component for the direct payment is a fixed payment if they cover some undercover firms. So they have a list of undercover firms. So that's the direct payment from writing up the articles. And they also have some beyond that. I talked to a few Seeking Alpha authors. Some of them just say like, well, I want to publish good articles because I want to be a thought leader in this area. And some of them mentioned that, well, I got a job by writing good articles. And some of them said that, well, my articles were referred to in Wall Street Journal. That's a lot of satisfaction for me. So that's basically both qualitative and quantitative.
But would you be able to convert your number of articles into dollar terms? I guess my question is about that. Can you say how much more and on average?
Yeah. Ideally, we want to, but we don't have the number of subscriber videos. But of course, later on, I will show you the increase in productivity that's related to the increase in the financial payment. Matthias?
Yeah, I think one level somewhat related to Zach's comment, one level that you could look a little bit more into is really the platform level, because they must have thought about what they're doing. They're pretty deliberate on, you referred to this payment scheme. I think Jeroen in his job market paper looked at that. And so they seem to be optimizing their platform also in a way that they try to have lots of firms being covered, but then also retaining incentives for people to provide quality information. So here, one level that you don't really look at is at the more platform level, because you're always looking within a specific author, etc. So this broader selection, reallocation aspects you don't really look at yet. But that seems to be what they are concerned about, that if there's too much of this low quality stuff, it's diverting attention away from the ones that really put in the effort. And so they, at some point, even if they now still do articles, they're really good. But at some point, it just means even if they weren't well in doing that, they will not do it anymore, even if they can enhance it with AI, etc. So these kind of more market level, platform level effects be what they are concerned about. And so showing potentially whether there's some evidence of this attention crowding out, etc., would be the last step of between all the levels that you have here, and would also explain why they're kind of going, at least being more cautious on this, because they have an incentive to keep the platform running in a way. So that would be useful to do.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Matthias. Yeah. So as a starting point, we're just trying to understand what's going on here. But at some point, we want to understand, well, they have this interesting policy going on. So what are the benefits, costs for them? Like you said, they care about the quality. This is their competitive advantage for this platform. So if the average quality went down, maybe that's a concern for them. But also later tests will show they are able to cover more firms. So it'll be interesting to look into the net benefit. And
Yeah, especially because they're having this, Jeroen looks into this payment scheme where it's really incentivizing covering more firms. So in many ways, they're liking this, that there's more coverage, but they must really see a big drawback on that, discouraging the real valuable providers that get anyone interested in this platform to begin with. So looking into that dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Regina?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to know that in one part of the base level normal volume. I was just struggling with that. You emphasize it's mostly positive, but I think it's Frank said yesterday that we feel investors take too much. Do you know if this abnormal volume somehow related to production in the trade? And especially given that these are articles written by low quality authors, right? Do they push, we feel, investors to trade in the wrong direction? Potentially, I don't know if you can expand it in a comment based on your experience made so far.
We use, like you said, we use the absolute level of the trading volume. One thing we could look into is the direction of the retail trade and probably look at the profitability after.
Reversal in the future.
Yeah, you know.
They're higher quality than
Yeah. Thank you. Frank?
So my question is kind of related. So are you, is it possible that there is, when AI generate articles, they're just reacting to some sort of market events, and so they just basically see, oh, there's something happening, and there's a market reaction, I'm going to react to it and just summarize what's going on. Whereas, the author, like, the high quality articles, they are actually contributing to some sort of price recovery.
So at this point, the detection tool will basically catch both cases. Like they probably like some quick summary of the market events, or someone who have their thesis in mind, but they ask the ChatGPT to help them maybe write the first draft or something like that. We haven't looking like basically it's like the content. Is there any difference in the content? So first of all, we actually didn't find a significant difference in terms of the timing in relation to these more significant events like 8K or earnings announcements or other. We also control for the number of media coverage. One thing we are thinking about to tease out more about the content thing is like doing some topic analysis and looking into whether there are some differences there. Maybe that can give us some idea. And we just learned from Valeria yesterday, we can use AI to help us to do the topic analysis. Yeah. Christine?
Do you view this as a descriptive paper, or are you trying to tell the story? Because it very much reads descriptively, but then when you present it here, I feel like you're angling more toward AI that causes outcomes. So how do you view it?
Well, so it's I would say, I would say it's a descriptive paper. It's descriptive in nature. This is my view. Yes, we probably should be a little bit careful about the language, but the thing is we are confident about the tool that they can help us classify this AI generated articles versus that are not. And also we have the market reaction test, and Zach, we learned from Zach that this can help us a little bit. I think that probably it's descriptive in the sense that we are trying to understand what's going on. We are adopting a let the data speak approach, but we also have this tool helping us to classify the articles and have the this article publication, which can help us leaning towards to tell us the impact of the AI use.
For some results, you would have something that's closer to cost, right? So for instance, on your firm level analysis, when you read the intro, I was like thinking about all kinds of selection effects, but then I see your analysis and you do stuff within author. And so you have within author where your tool says they used AI, and that same author with like a similar experience has changed that fast. now writes one that seems to be, your tool says is human written, and you see different results.
Yeah.
In my mind, that is pretty consistent with it likely is sort of driven by the AI.
Yeah. So our the fixed effects, our research design can help us with a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but it depends on the analysis. Some of the analysis are probably more descriptive.
Yeah.
Others are probably more closer to what Christine is saying. That's gonna give you something that is driven by AI.
Yeah. So it's a combination.
But in terms of, sorry, just with the semantics there, I do think like whether it's causal or not is something different from whether the goal of this is descriptive or not, because it's this even good descriptive evidence is causally, like the description is what does this policy do, and there's not much of a theory behind this, and so that's where your answer of let the data speak on that policy is fine, and so the paper is descriptive but has good evidence that it's really about that policy, and that can be causally traced to that policy. That's completely fine, but like the theory behind it, why the mechanism works, or we didn't start with a theory and test that. So I think that's more the difference, and less like is this associational or causal? It's still descriptive in nature. That's at least
just on this related to Christian's points and Frank's. I mean, wouldn't it be still an issue if, say, there's earnings announcement, and the author says, "Well, here's the story. Please kind of summarize and come up with an article," right? So then, I mean, it could be still within the author, but because the author is reacting to an event and quickly comes up with an article, what you see in terms of volume and market reactions could be just picking up this choice to focus on this event, right? I mean, the author could be sometimes writing these general articles about personal views, but sometimes can be writing about specific event that happened, and AI, it's very quick. I mean, to what extent authors compete actually with each other, right? Like when whatever Tesla announces earnings, probably they want to be first to come up with an article, right? So then it makes a lot of sense to ask Gen AI, like, well, here's an earnings call, write an article about that. Here's my kind of story that I want you to feature, and then they will come up with an article, but then it will be picking up, of course, general information that's coming out from the announcement as opposed to,
Yeah. So So I mean, this is like a valid thing for us to think about. So I have the figure, but in our figure, we actually saw the percentage of AI articles. We didn't see much seasonality there. So this gives us some comfort that it's not purely capturing some like the seasonal events like earnings or like these things. But and also in the we also kind of like did the compare the timing of the articles. We didn't find that AI articles tend to be more timely covering the big events in our so we have the determinant test. So that's basically our sense for the important, at least for the important events. It seems less it's a concern.
You have the same endogeneity problem that all the media literature has had. And then just repeating what Larry said here, which is that there's a selection function even within a person. The author fixed effects help. There's a selection function, and that's really very, very difficult to remove.
That's a caveat. So, but one thing maybe we can do is to look into this intraday trading analysis. So we do have the timestamp about when the article was published, and then maybe we can look into more like the timestamp and look into the market reaction. Nimit. Oh, sorry, Scott.
So Ed's had his hand up for a while. Ed, did you want to ask a question?
Ed,
Larry,
yeah.
sorry, Eddie.
Sorry, it's related, Edward.
Thanks. This goes back to Regina's comment. I think it's really important for you to look at sign returns here, because when I look at like the collection of and even the discussion in the paper around like plagiarism or it's like disinformation, this reminds me a lot of Paul Tetlock's paper of Stale News, where it's like basically what they show in that paper, if you'll recall, it's kind of like there's return reversals afterwards. You have a bunch of retail investors basically mistrading on news as though we're like really stale news as though it was news. You have reversals afterwards. It seems like the takeaway here is largely positive. But if this is just stale news, basically, that kind of hypes up individual investors,
Yeah.
it's actually the exact opposite conclusion, like price discovery, price formation. So I think it's really important to kind of look into this.
Yeah.
Because and it doesn't take away from the paper. I think it's just as interesting. It's just it's a very different takeaway, right? But that seems to almost be what like Seeking Alpha is even worried about.
Yeah.
Plagiarism.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we can definitely think about extending this market level test to look. We now focus on the market reaction, but maybe we can look more into the return reversal.
And it's interesting because you have like a sequence of other posts, or whether it's kind of like an earnings announcement, an AI generated article 10 days later or something, to retail investors trade as though that's like brand new news.
Yeah.
You know, which is super interesting, actually. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So there are two possible scenarios here that you might want to think about. One is the experienced analysts are not using AI because they have less expertise with AI, or they are, have higher adoption costs. And the new ones are coming in and using AI, and the quality is lower. So Seeking Alpha is right to curtail use. Alternatively, it's when an analyst is new, or when an experienced analyst is covering a firm for the first time, the AI actually knows more than the analyst, but as the analyst gains experience, the analyst knows more than the AI and switches to writing more author-generated articles, in which case there is a steady state level of AI usage you should see. And Seeking Alpha is not right to regulate that or curtail that usage, right? Because it leads to expansion of Seeking Alpha coverage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and maybe Seeking Alpha itself recognizes this issue, which is why there is some forbearance that Zach was talking about earlier, right?
Yeah. So when Mark and I talked to the founder, David Jackson, he acknowledged that, yeah, like you said, he acknowledged this probably is an overly harsh approach, because ideally they want every article to represent a unique thesis. So they still want good authors to be good authors. But he also acknowledged that they don't have a better approach for now. But going back to Matthias' point, like maybe what we can, maybe one implication for Seeking Alpha to think about is what does that mean for them? Do they really, yeah. Okay. Anya and
Very interesting paper, and I learned a lot. Discussion. I'm obviously not an expert in this, but I'm trying to like connect the dots of what I know from this literature. And one thing that I learned recently about Seeking Alpha from one of the Joran's papers, that it's a big problem to have content forums, right? So like content forums, when they enter Seeking Alpha, then they kind of become more competitive, and that decreases the production of niche content by other users. And I'm wondering if you could do something along those lines. I really like your tests on author originality, or not originality, but like really understanding who is using AI. Are those like individual analysts or content farms that are just trying to flood the market? Because that can help you address Eddie's point, Tina's point, like what is happening with this.
yeah. So if I understand correctly, so you are basically you want us to you want to say more about who are using AI, to look into the author characteristics, whether they are like the
individual. What is the prior track record?
Yeah.
If they're like just republishing the same information with their content run,
Yeah.
or is it really great?
Yeah, so look into the content of this. Yeah, and how to tell us how they are using the tool. Yeah, sorry for waiting.
I kind of agree with Matthias' point to sort of look at this more spillover platform level and this crowding out idea. And I could think of two ways the crowding out could happen. One of them would be on the same day, there's a bunch of AI generated articles and I'm distracted. The other one could be there's no AI articles, but there's this threat that the article might have been AI or not.
Yeah.
And that's why this sort of reduced the amount that I sort of wait on that article. And those like different types of crowding out that would be, I think you have the variation smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. So like again goes like maybe we should extend the analysis to more look into this platform specific no AI policy, the implication for the platform. Yeah. Okay, so since we're talking about Seeking Alpha, let me move forward a little bit, talk about the Seeking Alpha platform. Okay, so with the development of technology and the internet, investors started relying more on the alternative sources and alternative platforms to look for information and look for financial statement advice, financial statement analysis. So among all the platforms, Seeking Alpha is the leading platform, very popular, very successful. It was launched in 2004 by David Jackson, and nowadays it attracts 20 million active users, and we sell around 4,000 articles per month. The revenue mainly comes from subscriptions. And interestingly, this platform has a team of more than 60 human editors who are trying to make sure that the articles are well presented and insightful. So ideally, they really want every article to represent a unique thesis. And the review process is quite good. So we submitted 3 times and got rejected 3 times. It's like 10 to 15 hours.
That's not a kid to the drill.
That's better. That's probably a better experience. And the contributors include retail investors and industry experts. So it's like wide range of contributors, authors. So on average, the articles are less formal than sell-side research. Prior literature suggests that Seeking Alpha provides relevant information to the capital market. So the articles can predict the future earnings, future returns. It can increase the informed retail trading, but it goes back to Regina's suggestion. Maybe we can look into that more. And then I have another paper showing that Seeking Alpha payment change, they increase the visibility of small cap companies and such that the small cap companies are more likely to be acquired. So Seeking Alpha, so the prior literature suggests that Seeking Alpha is an important platform for investors. I think, Xiuming.
Yeah, who are the subscribers? They are retails or institutional investors or both. Your trading volume analysis can potentially be broken into these 2 batches and can give you some sense who get worse off, who better off.
Yeah. Short answer, both. Both retail investors and some industry experts are subscribing to the website. So I did talk to some retail investors, both some retail investors and some hedge fund managers. But I think we can probably tease out the trading volume by retail investors and by these large institutional investors to say, again, going back to Eddie and Regina's point, like to say who is like basically affected by these AI articles more. Yeah.
I figure differentially by form articles versus uninformed articles.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then we know on November 30th, 2022, ChatGPT was officially released. Okay, so in early 2023, authors were wondering about, okay, so are we allowed to publish articles that are AI generated? So the official response came in March 2023 that Seeking Alpha considered AI generated content as plagiarism. So their argument is, well, we are a cross-source platform, and our competitive advantage is we want every article to represent a unique thesis. Every article has some unique insights in it. And then if we allow the use of AI, then everything will converge. So everything will converge to one view, that is the bot view. So that's against the seeking alpha value proposition. Matthias?
Yeah, indeed, they may even do something which is good for all of us because we know there's nice research showing that if the models just keep being trained on model generated data, it's going to collapse. And so I think this is why it's important that we keep also some incentives for like differently produced information. Maybe that thesis isn't true anymore, but okay, so then they don't need to consider that. But yeah, there's at least several papers that would suggest that.
Okay, yeah, we can still think about it. Okay. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I know that maybe in your study you will talk about that. You actually talk about after the no AI enforcement policy, they actually launch a new product like virtual analyst reports. Essentially, it's to synthesize all the authors' reports. So I thought this is very interesting. It could be either the catalyst of this no AI enforcement policy, or it's kind of like the concept, like market level consequence, client level product consequence. It's kind of like the product differentiation. They are trying to see this in the human written articles, like differentiate product they can deliver to the investor. And then the other part is I generate the AI articles for you, synthesize for you. So if this is a platform level consequences, I thought it's very interesting that along the line what Matthias mentioned and Sarah mentioned before. But if this is a catalyst for the no AI enforcement policy, then it could be impacting some outcomes in your study because this can suggest some policy direction changes from the seeking alpha, and then those writers actually respond to that, so that's how they change the written article, like stuff like coverage of the company. So I don't know which is which, because one, I think it doesn't impact your paper, the causal inference or any inference, but it's actually a very interesting outcome. But the other one would be a little bit caveat.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand correctly. So what do you mean by catalyst? If you
It's kind of like a determinant when they think about when we implement the no AI enforcement policy, that's what they had in mind. They actually want to have a differentiated product to the investors.
I see. Or they are just like so I think I should know the date, but I think their virtual analyst report that was pretty December 2024, so that's not in our sample period. So that's one thing, and I think they want to preserve their human written insights for their crowdsourced platform. And my understanding is they want the virtual analyst report basically probably help the readers to better digest the information on their website. But I don't know how much that would be affecting our inference. Maybe I'm missing something here.
One is about consequences, product of market consequences. So this is like differentiated product. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
That would be interesting outcome. What if they actually had that in mind? Because it's kind of like if there are no AI policies like December 2023, this is 1 year after.
Yeah.
When they implement this policy, they actually had this differentiated product plan in mind, and then maybe investors, those writers may respond to that. Then that would be.
Yeah, so we checked the forum. As far as I'm saying, it's like the virtual analyst thing is pretty like not really a lot of pre-release. Because I subscribe to their emails and I check the contributor forums. I think it's really, I don't think it's kind of like, oh, we are going to do something in 1 year. Yeah, Phil.
I mean, based on the last bullet point there, I'm interested. Like, what exactly do you think Seeking Alpha is concerned with? Because I assume they already had plagiarism detection software in place, right? So if all they were concerned about was a new source of plagiarism, I could just say AI is allowed as long as it wouldn't constitute plagiarism had it been written by a human. So it sounds like they're concerned with something beyond plagiarism. And if so, what is it that they're concerned about exactly?
Yeah. So so there's what they told us and what they told the contributors and the readers is that they basically want every article to represent some unique insights. And that's So technically, theoretically speaking, they can rely on the human editors to basically tease that out. So, but probably related to Matthias' question, but maybe if maybe we don't know what's gonna happen if they didn't really have this plagiarism detection or the human editors. Maybe what's gonna happen is if they allow the AI use, they may say a lot of summations, they may say a lot of articles, and that will overburden the human editors. And probably we know like there is some like the summation, the turnaround time, and probably that will squeeze out, that will probably the really good articles may not be getting to the may not get into the platform in time. So that probably will reduce the relevance of the website for investors. Maybe that's one of their concerns.
As far as you know, in terms of what they're concerned with the content, it's just really a plagiarism concern.
So what they stated is this is just the plagiarism concern. It's against their value proposition. Okay, Neme.
I'm sorry if you missed this, but if I missed this, but what results in terms of article flow do people who contribute news articles to Seeking Alpha, do they do this after earnings announcement, after news releases, or is it in between, like in other periods? Do you have a sense for that? Right.
Yeah, so they do have some articles. I mean, after the like the 8K or the earnings release, so we do observe some articles doing that. But because we are using these analysis articles, firm fundamental analysis articles, even if the articles are published after this event, what I observe is they talk about what this event means for the company.
The reason why I ask is because, I mean, Seeking Alpha is one information intermediary.
Yeah.
There are other information intermediaries, and there's evidence of I think AI used by analysts, by others, and everyone else. So
yeah,
like it's not just what Matthias is saying about within platform crowding out, but to the extent there is capital market level additional information that's coming out that's AI generated. Is the market responses that you see could be a result of AI use by other information intermediaries, by like EP using some sort of AI tool to summarize articles, summarize news events better? Like I just wonder whether there might be some market-wide effect compounding what you're picking up.
I see. So first of all, Seeking Alpha is a quite influential platform for investors. So that is basically shown by prior literature and also some anecdotal evidence. So first of all, this well established that Seeking Alpha articles do move the market, and then maybe like for example, like some other articles maybe. Some other platforms, they may have some AI generated content. Well, so I think going back to like the traditional media, like other to the extent that like other information intermediaries, we control for that in our regression. So that's sort of like mitigating the concern. Yeah, and maybe one thing we could do is to look into this intraday level analysis to look into really how the market reacted to this article.
And I know that you control for other information intermediaries.
Yeah.
Is there the extent other information intermediaries are also using AI? That is something that's harder to control for, right? So I mean, I appreciate that Seeking Alpha might be is an important information intermediary that moves the market, but maybe the extent there is this prior evidence which shows that Seeking Alpha moves the market, if they're able to separate out the news event from the Seeking Alpha contributing the contribution,
yeah,
maybe you can use that same causal technique in your paper to see if you can separate out the AI Seeking Alpha combination from other news events and other information.
Yeah. So like as much as what we can do to control for
it. To it because I don't have a sense. That's all.
Yeah. So so I think empirically we can technically speaking we can use the same technique to do that. While cost is an issue always, but the thing is so let's think about other information intermediaries. Well, so for professional information intermediaries, let's think about, of course, sell-side analyst is a natural place to think about. And I know Jeremy has a paper looking into that. But my understanding, based on my conversations with several brokerage houses, is that they may use AI to do the information acquisition activities, and it's possible they use generative AI to help them clean up writing. But it's less likely that they would use Gen AI to generate content because they have very high reputation and career concern.
They might not be as forthcoming as Miguel is, right? They might be more like,
Yeah, but the thing is, they do have their I don't know whether the latter would be related to the career concern or not, but for analysts, this is their product. So they do think they have strong reputation and career concern there, and they are very careful about that. Yeah, Siva?
Yeah, no, so I have just like simple clarifying question.
Yeah.
And ordinary people like me sort of like distinguish like whether this article is actually generated by AI or human, because there might be some, fundamental difference because, I see this article, then, I want to train based on this information versus not, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing some examples in the paper, but be very useful to like what's happening, right?
Yeah, you're not missing anything. So I also had the same question. So what I did is I asked the 2 students who took the FSA class to basically, without telling them, just to ask them whether they can tell the differences. Sometimes they can, and a lot of times they cannot. So they cannot tell the differences between AI text and human text.
Then what would be sort of like the fundamental mechanism that people may react to one type of article versus another?
So we think it is the fundamental insight or fundamental idea in the articles. So this goes back to like basically what AI can do and versus what AI cannot. So we learned that Gen AI has limitations like numerical reasoning. We learned from yesterday, and it has the problem of hallucination, and more importantly, for the human articles, a lot of times you can see that they talk about their private information acquisition activities. For example, they talk to employees, they visit the company, they talk about their personal experience, and sometimes they have like very different idea, different insights from the like what people are saying in the market. So these things, like because we know what LLM is doing is to predict the next talkings, it seems like the AI generated articles are less likely to capture these insights. Matt.
Sample is only on the ones that got through the screening process and were eventually posted. I mean, I know you don't have access to all of the ones that didn't.
No.
But I was wondering if you have at least some idea of like the descriptive stats for the submission rates over time. And I'm wondering, sort of back to Phil's question about like if they had already needed to be good, insightful level stuff, then why do you need this new policy?
Yeah.
I'm thinking one reason might be if you get 12,000 submissions a month all of a sudden that are AI generated swill, you don't want to have to look at them and read them and figure that out. You want to be able to say, we now have a plagiarism screen, and 90% of the stuff now just immediately gets caught.
Yes.
And you get some AI that was not, immediately caught by this because they did read it and they said, oh, I actually, I just used this as a template. Now I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then maybe the editors read that, they just say, oh, this looks like AI, but actually there is something, else here, and we're going to forbear it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that question a lot of times too, but we don't have the summation data. So what we did is we sent our results to Seeking Alpha to ask them whether what we saw, the pattern is consistent with what they saw, and their response is yes. So which gave us some like comfort.
Like, were they saying we were just inundated by AI generated swill, or? I would expect. I mean, I know that's what happened on a lot of platforms.
Yeah, I guess what they mean is they do say a lot of AI generated submissions. But in terms of like the total number of submissions, we don't have that data. We would love to, but we don't, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. So let me quickly move. We talked a lot about these things already. So they improve their enforcement actions. They introduce some proprietary AI detection tool to better detect and deter AI-generated submissions in October 2023. And in January 2024, they publicly announced that they caught and banned 25 authors from the use of AI. Okay, so now let me talk about how we detect AI articles, and a lot of this has already been covered by Ben's presentation. So when we started this project, there are 20 tools in the market, and GPT-0 and Originality AI were always listed as top tools, top AI content detection tools. So it is an AI classifier that is designed for detecting AI-generated content. It was trained on a large corpus of both AI and human written text. So it was shown as one of the most accurate detectors. Also demonstrates robustness against bypassing techniques. And also, we also saw it performs well across different text types, including news articles, paper abstracts, student exams. So we saw, and these are all like basically shown by the computer science papers. So we chose Originality AI, also giving our research budget, limited research budget. And so the tool give us the output, which is AI confidence score. So the AI confidence score indicates how confident Originality AI is that AI is used in this text. So we identify AI articles if the AI confidence score is above 95%. Okay, so to clarify, the 95% doesn't mean that 95% text is generated by AI. It is just the probability is like more than 95%. We're more than 95% sure that the content is AI generated.
The entire content or some of the content?
So we use the document level, and it is what we got is like it's like AI is used throughout the article. But of course, and we also learned that of course if you use it more to a larger like if you apply AI more to more text, probably the confidence score is a bit higher, but it's not one-on-one match.
Let me just ask relatedly. So, how easy is it for an author to try to trick, the software?
Yeah.
And move some things around, like introduce some random words along the lines of what Matt was saying. Yeah. That basically seems like there's no way AI reading it because it makes simple mistakes.
Yeah. So when we use a tool, that's something we definitely care about. Like we want to make sure it's relatively robust against these bypassing techniques. So first of all, there's the computer science paper showing that, and internally, Originality AI, they are also worried about that. So internally, they have a red team and a blue team. So the blue team are all the developers, and the red teams are the people who are trying to fool the developers. So they have this internal thing, like trying to make sure the tool is doing a pretty good job detecting AI content. And of course, the tool is improving this what's happening in the market. Yeah. Okay, so Siva, you're asking about the human article and the AI article. So let me give you one example, and this is one of the many examples. Both are covering Apple, and so the Originality AI is telling the different patterns between human text and AI text. Okay, so we get the data from Seeking Alpha, and we focus on the analysis section articles, which basically are form level fundamental analysis. And our sample period include both baseline period before ChatGPT, the introduction of ChatGPT, and after the enforcement of no AI policy. We saw this figure, but let me show you again. Because we spent a lot of time trying to do the animation, so just want to show you again. So we find a sharp rise in the AI generated articles, peaking at 13.4%. And then we find a decline in the percentage of AI articles after the enforcement of a no AI policy. So the decline seems to be consistent with that, Seeking Alpha's no AI policy enforcement effort. Okay, so now we look at the article level consequences. So we conducted this analysis at the article level to compare the article informativeness, AI article informativeness versus human articles. So the independent variable is an indicator if the article is an AI article. And for the dependent variables, we follow Dyer and Kim paper. We use abnormal trading volume and absolute CAR. We can use the signed CAR. And but for now, we use the absolute value and 3 days from the publication date of the articles. So we find the coefficients on AI article to be negative and significant, suggesting that AI articles lead to smaller trading volume and abnormal return than human articles. Yes, Xu.
How can you be sure that this is because AI articles are less informative or AI articles are more complicated, so it's more difficult for investors to process, or you do not differentiate?
Yeah. So basically here we're sort of following the Dyer Kim paper looking at 3-day market reaction to capture the informativeness. But again, going back to Eddie and Regina's point, maybe we can look at a longer window to see whether there is a return reversal that can give us a more comprehensive picture of there.
I'm thinking about maybe 2 other ways.
Yeah.
First is, you could like what Ed and Beth did in their paper, looking at the linguistic properties of the AI generated report and human generated report. And the second one is, try to differentiate based like what Xiuming suggested, retail trading volume and institutional trading volume. Presumably retail investors, they should be more affected by information processing.
Yeah, definitely. So for the first point, we did do it, and we now include that analysis in the appendix. So we did, consistent with Beth's paper, we do find AI articles, they are less readable. And one thing we did is we include that textual attributes in the regression, and the results seem still hold. So that give us some comfort level confidence, but we can also conduct further analysis. Yeah, Kailash?
Do the authors have some incentive to stay on a regular cadence? Like I know I read that for the Substack people, they really need to send it out every week in order to keep their readership. Is something like that happening for Seeking Alpha as well? And the reason I ask that is because then you get into these portfolio reallocation type choices where I'm an experienced author. I know that I need to keep writing something once a week. And so maybe I decide, you know what, I have something really good to say, I'm going to say it myself.
Yeah.
And then for the other articles where I don't have as much to say, I'm going to outsource to AI, and then that could be driving the negative correlation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So we do say that on average effect, our average figure, we didn't say the seasonality there, but we probably
tested is some measure of readership or viewership or clicks.
Oh yeah.
And I think you have comments already in the paper.
Yeah.
And then see if when I write regularly, does that increase my readership? And it's a small concern. If you stay descriptive, it doesn't really matter, I guess.
But we can probably look into that, the pattern of their articles. But since you mentioned, I do want to mention we also use some non-market proxies. We use comments to corroborate the findings there. Yeah, Lee?
I have a more philosophical question. Do you think this type of AI detection papers, like what you and Ed and Beth, that is kind of unique to the current time period? As time evolves, social norm change, language change, maybe in the future, our language, human language, is so affected by AI, you can't even act or philosophically, how do you think this
Yeah, yeah, of course, our results are subject to the caveat that how good we can capture these AI articles. And I know Beth mentioned that. I want to emphasize again, like we are using what happened right after the ChatGPT, and we are very confident that the tool for now, the tool nowadays can very well capture the AI articles during that period. But what happens in the future? So like maybe so it's like a cat mouse game over the longer period, and what's gonna eventually gonna evolve probably nobody knows. But the thing is like a couple of things that we think that probably can extend in the longer period in the future is probably again human articles probably will still have some more unique insights coming from their personal experience, coming from the private information acquisition activities. And later on, we show the productivity test, and maybe that's something that we can also extend to the future. Add and yeah, well, yeah, okay.
I feel like I might be missing something here, so correct me, but if we just flip the research question and said, when do journalists rely on AI versus use their independent thought? We had the same results, right? Wouldn't we just interpret it the opposite direction? So you're assuming that the article is generating the market response, but if we just assume that journalists have a selection function and they write about important things, and when it's an unimportant event, they outsource to AI.
Yeah, so I think it's probably related to Kailash question, like when they are writing the AI articles, and maybe they are covering the less important things, and probably that can explain the results.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't see anything to tease it apart, and I understand that prior literature has shown that these journalists or these analysts have a market effect. But if you sort of go back in the media literature, the presumption was that they have no effect, and it's driven by selection. And then they sort of work really hard to find, is there an actual incremental effect of a journalist or an article? So, you started with the flipped maintained assumption, which I don't know. I didn't see anything to tease those apart.
We haven't. So first of all, this article, some of them are probably are next to a few events by the corporate, but a lot of these articles are actually not that close to the key events. But I can see that probably one thing, the selection is what events they are covering. Maybe that can explain the results. We haven't done anything related to that, but that's maybe something like we can look into. I know there is the KLD data set for us to look at different events, so maybe that's something we can look into.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be there was a Wall Street Journal article. It doesn't have to be a firm-initiated event.
Yeah.
And I've said this, a few people have said it. It's just is the trickiest problem when it comes to media research.
Yeah.
So just being a little bit more careful. Maybe it's just a matter of saying, look, this is the first step. We don't know which way the causality goes, and someone else can come along and figure it out.
Yeah.
On that, one thing that's consistent with sort of Ed's concern is also when you do your table 4B and you have the sort of comments and the editors, you don't find much. That those results are pretty weak, right? So I actually find it somewhat ironic that the editors saying we're getting rid of AI, we don't want it, and then they have zero ability to distinguish between what's an AI article and what's not an AI article when they do the editor's picks, right?
Yeah. So for the comments thing, we do find a lower comments even after we control for author fixed effects.
Once you put the author fixed effect in it,
it's smaller. It's smaller. We even can see something here. Yeah. So do you think maybe we can consistent with what Ed said, maybe we can look into the events. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be helpful. My suggestion would be you actually have a panel. I would set the whole thing up as a panel.
Yeah.
And you can throw in fixed effects for these events.
Yeah.
Some press and the other stuff, and then the rest is just caveating it and saying you can't fully tease it out.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it much better way, as Ed said, right? Because it could be anything. Political intraday. And then if you institutionally know that when you submit an article, it takes between an hour, I'm just making this up, an hour or 5 hours randomly before somebody have looked at it and released it. So it's close to random. And then look right around that time.
Yeah, we definitely can look into this intraday. We do have the timestamp of when the article is published on the website. But one thing maybe,
Let's say you don't find anything,
Oh.
and you just write the whole story as a descriptive paper.
yeah,
Is when do they write it? And they use ChatGPT more, as Classy pointed out, and it's a little less important
yeah.
one, right? That would be interesting.
Yeah, so it's consistent with we're doing this let the data speak approach. It's like basically we're still trying to we show the results and we're trying to figure out what are the mechanisms there. Probably we can do more there. Yeah. Yeah, Phil.
Smaller question, but it's one of the controls, like when I look at the actual table, the one that really loads a lot is R&D for both abnormal return and abnormal volume, which I think, all I'm getting at is I think in a really more general sample, that wouldn't as much be the case. So like, do you know like what is going on in terms of the selection of the type of firms followed or the type of, or I mean, is it more of a forward-looking innovation stuff? I mean, help me a little bit to understand what's going on in the setting.
Yeah.
Think about AI, non-AI.
Yeah, so we did a determinant test. We now threw it in the appendix too. So in terms of the firm different characteristics, we didn't find much differences there when we compare AI articles and versus human articles. Yes, well, I agree with you, R&D load pretty significantly here, but it seems like the main message is controlling for that. We still find the results. Yeah, but yeah, okay, so we can continue talking about the results, but I do want to show you some other.
Just interpretation wise, what is the economic magnitude?
Yeah, okay, so for column 4, this negative 0.24 corresponds to 7% of the sample mean.
Can you just tell in terms of what is like the CAR return?
The CAR is a return. CAR is a 3-day cumulative abnormal return. So that is, I think we already multiply this by, so this is 0.24%.
0.20.
Yeah. Okay, so we did cross-sectional cuts on the author tabs. So we find that experienced authors, they care about their reputation and they probably know how to use AI and they probably know what good quality means. We find that they actually read better quality AI articles. And for opportunistic AI authors who jump into the platform right after ChatGPT launch, we find that they publish less informative AI articles. Okay, so we also compare AI articles with days with no articles. We find that, so if you look at column 2 and column 4, we find that AI articles, although it is less informative than human article, they still provide some information content for the market. So next we look at the author. Yeah.
Push that result a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, when you get these comments that these AI articles are probably not very important, they're more important than no information.
Yes, they are more important than no information. Yes, yeah.
That could be selection, right? That's exactly the point. Because
no, there's a gradation. I mean, I'm not countering the comment. I'm just saying there's a gradation of importance.
So some coverage is better than no coverage. So that's the message. Yeah.
Most important ones gets the experience, like human involvement. Then there's the AI. Then there's.
Yeah, we haven't teased that out, but that's kind of like one thing that we could look into. And our main message here is AI, some coverage is still better than no coverage, and they will show up again in later tests. So at the author level, we find that for the authors who adopt AI, their average monthly articles increase from 5 articles to 7 articles. So increase productivity. And we also show that they are more likely to cover new firms. And lastly, we look at the overall coverage by Seeking Alpha as a platform. We find that after ChatGPT, Seeking Alpha as a platform tend to cover more firms, and after no AI policy, it went down, and the change seems to be driven by firms that are covered by AI articles only or covered by AI articles and human articles. Okay, lastly, we are trying to look at the Seeking Alpha AI article coverage and the firm stock liquidity. We find that on average, AI articles do not have effect on stock liquidity. But going back to some coverage is better than no coverage idea, we find that for low coverage firms, as proxied by below median number of Seeking Alpha articles and below median number of analyst estimates, we find for these firms, AI-generated articles help improve stock liquidity. Okay, so again, in our paper, we document the prevalence of AI use on Seeking Alpha, and we document the consequences at the article level, author level, and firm level. So we hope to contribute to a few literatures. So we hope to contribute to the AI use in the market for information, and we think we're related to Jeremy's paper and all the other JAR conference papers. There is a reason our paper is the last one to present. And we also hope to contribute to understanding the relevance of Seeking Alpha, especially how does Gen AI affect the relevance of Seeking Alpha? And lastly, we extend the literature on the understanding of labor market impacts of AI use. So the econ paper is showing that AI use improve productivity for other professionals, and our effects are in line with what they find. With that, thank you very much again for the opportunity, and thank you for all the great comments. Thank you.